The world may have breathed a sigh of relief with the ceasefire between the United States, Israel, and Iran. However, in the negotiations in Pakistan, the two countries failed to reach a peace agreement.
We've had a number of substantive discussions with the Iranians. That's the good news. The bad news is that we have not reached an agreement, and I think that's bad news for Iran much more than it's bad news for the United States of America.
For the United States and Israel, this was not a victory, but a bitter pill that left them biting their nails. Why? Because none of their strategic goals were achieved. The Iranian regime did not fall, Iran retained its missile capabilities, Iran's nuclear weapons were not eliminated, and the formula for their agreement remained tightly under wraps. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, the figure who most urged Trump not to give up, also seemed unable to secure his own dream of overthrowing the Iranian regime. In Washington, the price Trump paid was far higher. His credibility among his own citizens had collapsed, and the majority of Americans agreed that Trump deserved to be impeached. What a bitter pill for the United States and Israel to swallow. If the United States returned empty-handed, Israel would suffer the same tragic fate. Since before the war, Netanyahu had been the loudest voice advocating for the continuation of the conflict. That is why Netanyahu urged Trump not to agree to a ceasefire. But Trump ignored him, and Netanyahu found himself not only defeated on the battlefield, but also marginalized by his own key ally. After being ignored, Netanyahu was not even allowed to sit at the negotiating table when decisions regarding Israel's security were being made. Netanyahu's political opponents did not take this opportunity to criticize him. Opposition leader Yair Lapid called the situation a political disaster. Meanwhile, Democratic Party Chairman Yair Golan said that Netanyahu promised a historic victory, but what he received was the worst strategic defeat Israel has ever suffered. This situation proves that U.S. intelligence assessments were accurate. Previously, U.S. intelligence had assessed that Israel's grand dream of replacing the Iranian regime was a farce. And indeed, now, after a month of attacks, Netanyahu's ideas have not materialized. The Iranian regime remains intact. Now, with the war almost over and the state of emergency lifted, Netanyahu must face another reality that cannot be postponed any longer. What else but justice, the sin that war always avoids? Netanyahu must return to the defendant's seat in court to face 3 concurrent corruption cases. Netanyahu's trial will resume on Sunday, April 12, 2026, because the Israeli justice system has been inactive during the war. Netanyahu isn't the only one returning home with a burden. Trump is too. The New York Times described the situation as similar to the Western Moment, the moment when Britain was forced to cede its position as a global power to the United States in 1956 due to exhaustion from the aftermath of World War II. The reason is that the United States military, supposedly the strongest in the world, appears incapable of reopening the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz only began to calm after the United States opted for a ceasefire. This demonstrates Iran's stronger position in this conflict than the United States. In fact, one justification for the United States' military presence in the Middle East for decades has been to keep sea lanes open, including the Strait of Hormuz. A Free Speech for People survey found that 52% of U.S. voters support Trump's impeachment, while only 40% oppose it. The survey involves 790 respondents and was released in early April 2026. This is the first time in the history of the United States that such a thing has happened. Previously, no U.S. president had been called for impeachment by his own people so early in his term. A clear majority of Democratic voters, 84%, supported Trump's impeachment. Ironically, Trump's own Republican supporters also supported his impeachment. A record 1 in 7 Republicans demanded Trump's impeachment.
Well, you know, when a late-night host is on network television, there is a licensing. I'll give you an example. I read someplace that the networks were 97% against me. I get 97% negative, and yet I won easily. I won all 7 swing states, popular, won everything. And if they're 97% against, they give me only bad publicity or press. I mean, they're getting a license. I would think maybe their license should be taken away. So we'll have to see. But when you think about this, 97% of the stories are opposed to me, and yet I win easily the election. It's pretty amazing when you think of it. That shows they have no credibility.
When there was no victory to celebrate, Trump resorted to his usual pattern, finding someone else to blame. His first targets were his own NATO allies. That's why Trump began discussing the possibility of withdrawing from NATO. The Wall Street Journal even reported that the Trump administration was considering closing U.S. bases or removing troops from Spain and Germany as punishment. His next target was the media. When CNN reported that Iran's National Security Council was pressuring the U.S. to accept a ceasefire, Trump reacted strongly. Trump threatened CNN and demanded an apology. For Trump, the narrative of failure is something he cannot accept. Ultimately, the ceasefire may have stopped the war, but it hasn't stopped the reality that Trump and Netanyahu must face. Both entered this conflict with big dreams and exited with none of them realized. Netanyahu now faces questions in a courtroom, while Trump faces questions from his own people. The Iranian regime remains, the Straits of Hormuz was only opened after peace was agreed, and the world is watching. The United States and Israel have had to swallow a bitter pill. The question now is, who will bear the consequences of the failure to reach an agreement?